So, I've kind of been thinking lately, I really am enjoying the judgments that are made in the Bible, right? The assertions, right? An assertion comes from assertive, right? And so, people don't like anything that's any, attack perfectly at something, right? And so that's why we talk about situational morality and understanding what you would do in each situation, right? So and that's what I believe that assertion is when you are you're assertive of what you feel. And if the other person is assertive of what they feel, I believe that if it's not based in emotion or a belief system outside of their heart, then we would be leading on always just finding the same ground, because there is a common truth in each situation. Unfortunately, we become egotistically attached to certain ideas, and we can't see that, right? And we'll rather carry our idea than look at maybe what the truth is in that situation, And I was thinking about how churches must stay relevant in times like these, or in times coming up to this, because I believe that we're starting to see that for any church to have survived, there had to have been a certain amount of passivity in the church itself. For example, if there's only a few churches and already there's not so many Christian people to even fill those, and you're running it like business because you got to heat the place and all this other stuff, then eventually you're going to have to be like, how do we stop talking about certain truths so that we can accept everybody, right? And as we do that more and more and more, just for acceptance reasons, where is morality anymore, and when are we still listening to our heart, which I believe is listening to God, So, you can always find ways to show a certain identity of Christ, right? And in church today, the pastor talked about if you want to know what God is, then look to Christ, right? What Christ is. And, and I understand what he's meaning by that. Look to all the stories about Christ and look at how he dealt with stuff in certain situations and stuff. But you have to know too is there is only certain amount of stories and subjective nature to Christ, so people can take and skew that to whatever they feel is necessary to work in the situation. For example, right now, okay, so Jesus is truth, right? Well, in a world where we're living in two intersubjective truths, how do you speak truth amongst that? In a church setting, you don't. That's why. Because we're sitting in a room that doesn't want to talk about anything, no judgments. They don't want to talk about what just happened the last 3 years. Not all of us. Some of us do. We want to talk about it, but it's not the time and the place, because we don't want to divide the church. Well, I understand unity, but that's unity through subjecting your morality to weakening society. So is that really the best way to unify? Or is unify when we can finally beat through the truth together and find out what is really true? That's unity. Otherwise it's passive aggressive, right? So he spent about 20 to 30 minutes kind of explaining that we need to look to what Jesus is if we want to know how to act. And then he went forward and he showed about 3 different aspects of Jesus, the last one being, and them all being very passive, compassionate situations where it was like live and let leave, turn the other cheek kind of situations, right? And the last one being him on the cross and saying, you still, to the evil one that's yelling up at him while he's being crucified, he's still showing compassion and love and acceptance to that being, right? And in that situational basis, what else could you have done? He's so stuck. You forgive him for he knows not what he does, but that's why he's in that situation. So the only way to get through to him and to say truth to him is, look who you are crucifying. One day that truth will be received, right? But I started to get uncomfortable because every situation was a passive Jesus, and then he's like, "Does anybody like to speak?" And that's what I really like about this church. And so I put out my hand and I said, we have to know that Jesus is somebody that acts in a situational basis. I said, and there's times when he's flipping tables and taking chaos and turning it to order, right? And I suggest right now, while there is so much chaos in the world, that people join in the truth, right? And speaking the truth to people, right? And I didn't say what the truth was, because as soon as I start saying any of that, then we're going into, muddying the waters of their idea of passive unity. And I hear a lot of people talking about, things are fine, right? Everything's fine. Just put your head down. Even certain Christians, I've been hearing this through, and I'm like, do you not see the connections about what's going on in Revelations and what's going on in the world? Like, I can't even believe even Christians are so going so to the Orthodox side that just trust, don't worry, we don't have to stand up at all. Well, that's not what Jesus would do, okay? Jesus is the archetypal hero story. He will stay behind truth, and his truth that has been spoke to him by the Lord right till his death, right? Even on his deathbed, he'll still love the person that he's trying to save, even though they will never be saved in this lifetime, likely. So, I could see the pastor promoting that passivity of unity passivity movement, right? There's a time and a place for that. And generally, yes, there's always little bubbles of passivity we should be in, and we should try to be as passive and less forceful upon the world. Of course, don't be looking for fights. But when the fight comes to you, and something bothers you about it, and if you feel it inside you, speak your truth. Right there. You could love them, they know not what they do, and just pretend that they won't be listening anyway, so I'm not going to stand up against them. But I think that is, you're pretending to be virtuous through passivity. It's way harder to speak truth. So I said what I had to say, and the pastor kind of said, we went over this yesterday, and how Jesus was a reformer, a religious reformer, and he kind of said, weren't you here last? It was kind of weren't you here last week kind of thing. Well, you know what? Not all of us are weekly visitors of the church, and to be honest, I just started going back to the church. So this is kind of we talked about this last week. Well, I'm also seeing that you don't talk about it all this week, and not everyone's tuning into every episode, right? And so I one other guy right next to me, he was actually talking about Carl Jung and psychology a second earlier, and I was like, this guy's cool. I'm in the right place if we got these characters in here, right? And he stood up and he's like, yeah, this is exactly what we need. He backed me up, and I was like, awesome, because I could tell there was mostly you could see by the room that the people just want peace away from the chaos of the world, right? And they don't even like to hear people say stand up against it, because then it challenges their idea of passivity, right? So I was so happy to have, because the pastor he's like, yeah, I'm on your side, but you weren't here yesterday about the reforms. Well, what are reforms? How do we reform things? And if you're a part of that, then what truth are you thinking your reforms are based upon, right? And I guarantee that was not talked about last week, because that would be pulling in our two intersubjective realities that we're living through, and in return causing people to come apart. And one of the most important things in life, though, is when some love is in your life, you be truthful with it. It may run, but the long time you're working on the time, right? The turtle wins the race in the end, right? wait for that message to come, and then the person will come back to you with their love, right? And that's, a lot of people can't take that journey because they need the people they love, right? They're needy and that's actually a lack of knowing of the Lord. When you need more from this physical world and from other beings than what your truth is, that shows you that you're willing to give up some of your truth just so you can, keep people around you to coddle you in your needs. So if Jesus was always like he was in that situation on the cross, do you think he ever would have got put up on that cross? No. And I see now, if we still had fundamental Christians running that church, and I said that out loud, and they could just exile me, call me a heretic too, but we don't have that anymore. So this is the great side of us circling, let's say, to the truth, I think we're way up here a lot of churches are way up here on the truth so they can, so they can bring in as much people as possible, right? And the church should be a sanctuary, let's say, of the ability to speak and open our hearts. Like, where do we get to, if we live in a government-run world where it's, you can't bring in biblical or spiritual morality to try to work your way in, you have to use their practices, then where else do we get to vote and speak about truth, right? I had a conversation the other day with a fella, and he's had some really amazing spiritual situations, like miracles happen to him. And we were talking about it, and I was telling him about my own, that that made it so I don't just believe in what the God or Lord is, I know of it. And he was almost making the same kind of assertions through these miracles that happened to him years and years ago that he didn't admit to people because he thought they'd lock him up for it, right, in the insane asylum. Well, fuck, he was smart not to say anything, because that's what the witch hunt is, right? People that start saying that they know, that's like, whoa, that's too assertive, right? No, that hurts people, because they're like, I don't know, so how could you know? So they'll witch hunt you, right? So, is the church a place to find truth? I would say you should look at all stories, not just the stories that comfort you in how you are acting. It's really easy just to keep reading the stories of Jesus being the Zen Buddhist that does nothing and just lives and let live. It's really easy to keep reading those stories and being like, I'm doing good. Look at me just being peaceful and loving them even though that they're being terrible to the world. Yes, love them because they are being terrible to the world, but that loving them is not coddling them in that hedonism and pathology. No. Love is truth. Okay, so if we start to want to talk about who is carrying the truth, see, there's two definite sides here that are coming out. And in the conversation with the guy that was talking about the miracles, he started to call people like anti-vaxxers and the Freedom Convoy and all those people like schizophrenics. And I go, hold on, my friend. How can you carry these two things? Like, you believe so much in something, know so much in something, then how can you be so fearful that you would push these tyrannical ideals on people? Because the only reason that you can, like, it's about the collective and you're gonna hurt the collective, no, like, we have to trust what's in our hearts, right? And that's him living through, and I could see he's living through fear. And he's like, you know what, I asked him, do you ever look at the Revelations? Don't you see some defining things here? Like, don't you see what's happened with Israel being the first to turn to the mark of the beast? Did you, like, it's too obvious. It follows the fucking story. You know what I mean? And he's like, oh, I just lost all faith in all of that, right? And that is why people are living in two different worlds at once. They might even say, I believe or I know of the Lord. However, knowing of the Lord is fearlessness. And fearlessness would never lead you to following tyrannical governments, right? So, he could realize that I had a lot more intellect, or let's just say a lot more actual information to put behind my words on why I was not vaccinated, why I stand behind freedom, why I am actually frustrated with people like yourself that are going around calling us schizophrenics because we have a different view. And, I went along telling him, you're looking at your screen, we're looking at our screen, you know what I mean? I'm not looking at a single screen, and I could see from my heart and what's been told to me by the world and what's surrounding me that's reminding me not to follow these pathologies, right? So people can do what they wish, right? I'm against tyranny. However, when your pathologies start to spill into my waters and the people that want to live as we want to live, now you can see how we will be pushing back against that pathology. So what side is the truth? Like, we got all these people standing behind like traditions and the conservative side, and they're being like, there's more important things for us to worry about right now in this moment in time than climate change. And that's like a classic thing. So right after this is the classic thing, after people realize we don't meet on the grounds of the tyrannical mark of the beast system, they go straight to, what about environment? Look, we're destroying the environment. I'm like, well, what does that even have to do with what we were just talking about? I can just see that you are following the programming. Now you have the next thing that you need to bring up that divides us. And I can see which TV screen you're watching. Okay, well, that movement about needing to do things right now to stop our consumption of oil and all of this stuff, this hyper novel idea of doing this so quickly is actually anti-life when you look at the big scheme of things, and we've seen in history. Okay, so Jesus is the truth and the life. Okay, so what is Jesus? He's standing behind life, that's for sure. So I see people standing for the life of the planet, not even realizing we are a part of that life. We are a part of that cosmos. So it's to me, and not only that, look who's standing on the abortion side of things, right? Obviously, conservatives are going to stand behind Christian morality that's based in their intuition, in their heart, that we don't want 1 in 5 babies taken from this planet. And we don't think it's okay for us to morally to not take the true feelings and justifications of what that actions are of stopping a life. What is stopping a life? Well, it's hard. You don't want to condemn people, call it murder, because so many people have done it. 1 in 5 lives are ended in abortion, right? Well, that's not pro-life, okay? And I'm not saying that they are using their cognitive dissonance to call it a bag of cells, because they are in their hearts good, and they know what they're doing isn't pro-life, right? They don't want to see that truth so they can paint any picture they want in their mind, and all is mine, so why not, right? Well, I'll tell you why not. As soon as people start to need to fight for the fact that almost everybody knows somebody that's had an abortion, so they're fighting for that person's ability to not be condemned by those around them. You know, we're just going to keep this normalized, and it's not promoting people to take on life and bring life to this world, and you know, they put so much importance into like the pain the woman might go through. I understand. I'll never understand. I'm a man, you know. However, I understand that there's fear of that. We should not turn people away from the biggest decision, one of the biggest decisions they'll make of their lives, to have a child. And it should just be nature, right? Following nature's course, you know. So I see the pro-life is obvious to me which side it is. So, and who is telling the truth then, right? It's definitely not these neoliberal ideals of compassion to all, no judgment upon a human at all, because that's just allowing people to just hide and get past the evils in themselves. And when they are able again, they can be evil again because they don't have the morality built into them to stop them. You have to fight the dragon one day. So I think that we can all just be an example of what Jesus can be. Like, there's so many people that are like, they will not believe the story of Jesus, you know? They may just never, I understand their trauma. I went through it too. I wrote a song that says, Jesus isn't my savior, back when I was 18, you know what I mean? But I learned a lot from that song. So we have to know that it's not believing in what Christ, the story of being allegorically true. Like it's not speaking it's like, is it an allegory or is it absolute truth, right? Like that's not what we should be talking about. It's like it's acting out Jesus Christ. What would Jesus do right now, right here? And if you're asking that question, there's probably an answer. There's a reason that question's being asked, because something has come in front of you that you need to confront. And if you take a moment, I swear to you, there will be a voice that comes in and tells you how to speak your truth. And that first inkling of a feeling of what to speak is what you should react on, not the editing of that comes in, because that's the ego trying to change what you're going to say, and that's not living in covenants with what Jesus is trying to speak. Right, that moment is the speaking in covenants. And even in Jesus' time, he lived different times. So if it was a true story, we have to know even the situational bases that he made his decisions upon that are in these stories, that we can base our idea of what Jesus would do, are still based on that time, right? And that experience. So if you go 200 years before right now, Jesus might actually have to tear people to pieces to fight for what is good. Jesus is what is done and put in front of you. That's why I'm more Dionysian in this sense. And I am talking about the very furthest situation where a man had to unsheath his sword, right? Because he did have things behind him to protect. And that, in that situation, was unfortunately a compassionate thing to do. Unfortunately, that time and place made Jesus' role have to be dark. That wasn't the role Jesus. That wasn't the time Jesus was in. He was in a time of that more like what we're in right now, where nobody really has truth coming out of their teachings. They're living through hedonism, and anybody that's speaking truth is being crucified, right? Well, we're not seeing people on crosses right now, but we're seeing censorship. We're getting people that are being deleted, right? And that is them gone, right? That's their messages and their truth being deleted. And that's how would they have done that before the time of information? They would have killed those people, right? So we're in those times of Jesus. So what would Jesus do right now? No, he's not drawing blood. This is not the time for blood. This is the time for standing in truth till your blood is spilled. Your own, not until, to the point that you would allow your own blood to spill. And that is being crucified and still loving the person that stuck you up there. We're in that time, and it's a more exciting story, almost, to see the hero's journey, to see it not have to resort to blood, right? And that's why the biblical times are in these certain situations where we don't have to find the glory in blood. So yeah, I believe we're in biblical times. Unfortunately, there is blood being spilled. And all parts of the world seem to be at different points in time in Revelations. I believe that we stick to the truth. We are now living, in my world at least, in this society where I can see where the evil falling 10 moves before they even know they're falling. I know we are living in the time where the meek shall inherit the earth. Who are the meek? Meek sounds like the weak or something, right? And a lot of newer definitions put that way, but no, the meek are those that have their swords sharpened. They know how to wield them. And because the people around them know they know how to wield them, they never have to drop one measly portion of blood, because they could tear everybody to pieces. And that fear, that having that sword on the back is, if you don't have morality of the Lord or your heart, you have to have the morality of the sword. So the meek shall inherit the earth. The ones that do not have to draw blood can rely on their intellect. They can, and that's the only reason they can look you straight in the eye and challenge you, is to know that you will not be able to, after I reach the end of your intellect and your justification of your sick ideology, I understand that evolutionary you would be swinging at me with something to end my life so that you could still win. Well, I will stare you in the eye, and the other meek of the world that are going to inherit this place will stare you in the eye and know that they have the Lord on their sides. And if that person is staring in the eye of truth in a way that they allow the mob to come around somebody that's in truth, and they need a mob to take on that truth because they can't take it truly on. Who's standing in the light? If you fit in the mob right now, you are living in the flesh, in the worst days to live in the flesh. Karma is real now. It may have taken thousands of years for us to see how real karma will get. And Abel is still sitting in purgatory, waiting for all Abel's descendants to fall. He's in all our hearts, knowing that. That sounds envious and stuff, doesn't it? No. It's called justice. He's not sitting there in purgatory like, God damn it, Abel, he's not angry. No, he's seeing the unfolding of of Cain falling. And he's expressing it in our hearts that we are on the side of Abel. Okay? Abel is the meek. This has nothing to do with blood descendants also. Descendants of Cain are descendants of Cain's ideology. So what ideas are you going to carry? Are you going to be descendants of Cain? Or are you going to be descendants of Abel? Are you going to be descendants of envy, greed, anger, hate for the very thing that you know in your heart is true and that you love? Or are you going to be a descendant of Abel? I have been a descendant of Cain. And there's times I can feel envy in my heart sometimes, and I can feel resentment, and I can feel Cain's presence. But Abel is who gets to act. Maybe I'll never be able to kill Cain out of my heart. And maybe Cain is the dragon on the chain. Abel is who acts. Much love.